Here we go, brothers. Imagine waking up one morning to a world that spent decades telling you that your very existence was the problem, that your natural instincts were toxic, that your presence was oppressive. And then, right when everything starts crumbling, the same voices that scream for you to leave suddenly whisper, "No, scream, please come back. We need you now." What if I told you that exact moment is happening right in front of our eyes in real time across every corner of the internet and every major city on the planet, and that the men who were pushed out, ridiculed, and replaced are quietly sitting back with their feet up, sipping coffee, watching the entire structure they were once blamed for holding together finally collapse under its own weight? Stay with me until the very end because I am going to show you undeniable proof that the reversal is already in full swing. And by the time this video finishes, you will understand exactly why millions of men are never, ever going back. And if you are ready for more raw, unfiltered angry guy content that cuts through the noise and tells it like it is, smash that like button right now. Share this video with every brother you know who needs to hear the truth, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss an upload. And listen, if you want to take complete control of your financial future and learn how to protect your assets, grow your wealth, and master the crypto markets the right way, head over to Angry's Crypto Academy. The full program is linked in the description below. Thousands of men are already inside building real freedom. Click that link and join us today. Also, if these videos are hitting home and you want to keep the angry guy firing on all cylinders, you can buy me a Red Bull through the link in the description. Every can keeps the truth coming. Let's get into it. Hard times are not coming, gentlemen. Hard times have already arrived. The grocery store lines are longer. The rent keeps climbing. The jobs that used to pay a living wage now barely cover fast food. And the people who spent the last 2 decades celebrating the decline of traditional masculinity are suddenly discovering that someone still has to take the garbage out, fix the power grid, load the trucks, and keep the lights on when the bill comes due. And guess who is not riding to the rescue this time? That is right. The same men who were called toxic for holding doors, called predators for saying hello, called oppressors for simply existing as men, have taken all that energy, turned it inward, built their own lives, and walked away. They lifted weights, stacked money, mastered skills, traveled the world, and found something the propaganda never wanted them to find: peace. Real, quiet, unbreakable peace. And now the panic is setting in. You can see it everywhere if you know where to look. Articles that used to celebrate the future is female are quietly being rewritten to ask, where have all the good men gone? Podcasts that spent years laughing about how men were obsolete now have episodes titled The Loneliness Epidemic Among Women. Dating apps that bragged about female empowerment are sending push notifications begging men to come back because the ratios are collapsing. Even the mainstream financial press is running headlines about plunging birth rates and asking who is going to pay into the system when half the population opted out of the game entirely. The message is crystal clear. The experiment has been run, the results are in, and the people who demanded men leave are now staring at the empty space where those men used to stand. Let me paint the picture for you the way it actually happened, step by step, so nobody can pretend this was accidental. It started small. A guy gets divorced, loses half his stuff, sees his kids 2 weekends a month, and decides the risk is not worth it anymore. Another guy spends years approaching women in public only to be told that approaching women is creepy. So he stops. Another guy watches his buddy get accused of something he did not do at work and realizes one wrong word can end his career. So he keeps his head down and his mouth shut. Another guy looks at the dating market, sees the expectations, does the math, and quietly says, "Nah, I'm good." One by one, millions of men made the same calculation at roughly the same time. They did not riot. They did not protest. They did not beg. They simply withdrew their attention, their effort, their protection, their labor, and their commitment, and they redirected all of it toward themselves. And society called that winning. Or remember the articles? Men are refusing to grow up. Men are afraid of strong women. Men are checking out because they cannot handle equality. They threw parade after parade celebrating the fact that men were dropping out of college, dropping out of the workforce, dropping out of dating, dropping out of marriage. They said it was progress. They said the world did not need men anymore. They replaced fathers with government programs, replaced husbands with batteries and wine, replaced protectors with hashtags and pepper spray keychains. And for a while, it felt like liberation. Women were going to have it all: careers, casual relationships, independence, endless options, no judgment, no consequences. Except reality does not care about slogans. Reality still needs food on the table. Reality still needs rent paid on the first. Reality still needs someone willing to work the dangerous jobs, the dirty jobs, the jobs nobody wants when the temperature drops below zero or climbs above 100. Reality still needs children to be born and raised if the entire system is going to survive another generation. And reality definitely does not care that somebody wrote a think piece about how patriarchy is the root of all evil when the power goes out and the pipes freeze. So here we are. The same voices that spent years telling men, we don't need you, are now posting tearful videos asking, where did all the men go? The same publications that ran cover stories about the end of men are now running cover stories about the loneliness crisis. The same dating coaches who taught women to raise their standards to impossible levels are now teaching those same women how to bring men back by lowering those standards and pretending the last 15 years never happened. The mental gymnastics would be comedy gold if it was not so tragic. And the craziest part, men are not angry anymore. That is what they cannot stand. They expected rage. They expected begging. They expected men to come crawling back the moment female attention dried up. Instead, they got silence. Calm, focused, polite silence. Men who wake up in apartments they own, drive cars they paid for in cash, lift weights in gyms they built in their garages, eat steak they grilled themselves, and sleep 8 hours a night without drama, without arguments, without false accusations, without wondering if tonight is the night a text message from 10 years ago gets screenshot and sent to their boss. That silence is louder than any protest march could ever be. And I want you to really let this next part sink in. These men are not hiding in their parents' basements, playing video games and eating junk food like the media wants you to believe. These men are out in the world living better than ever. They travel to countries where they are respected simply for being men. They build businesses that run without their constant attention. They have friendships deeper than most marriages. They have disposable income most married men with kids can only dream about. They have time, actual free time, to read, to train, to think, to create. They discovered that when you remove the constant drain of trying to keep a modern woman happy in a system designed to make that impossible, life becomes almost absurdly good. And now the panic buttons are being mashed. Suddenly, we are seeing viral posts from women in their 30s and 40s saying they were lied to. Suddenly, the phrase high value man is being thrown around by the same people who said judging men by their value was toxic. Suddenly, the women who bragged about not needing a man are making TikToks crying because their rent went up $300 and their date last week expected them to split the bill. Suddenly, the phrase soft life is trending, but only men seem to have achieved it. Let me read you some real examples so you know I am not making this up. Now, woman posts, I am 36, successful career, own my own condo, travel to 20 countries, but I cannot find a man who wants commitment. What is happening? The top comment from a man: you spent your 20s and early 30s treating men like disposable entertainment. Most of us watched, learned, and opted out. Good luck. Another one: I told men for years I didn't need them, and now that I'm ready to settle down, nobody wants me. I feel betrayed. Brother replies, you didn't need us when we were building. You need us now that you're done partying. That's not how this works. Another: where are all the masculine men? Everything is so soft now. And men responds, hey, we're right here. You just trained us that showing masculinity in your presence gets us canceled. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. So we show it somewhere else. The comments are brutal because the truth is brutal. And the best part is that none of these men are coordinating. There is no secret clubhouse. There is no leader sending out marching orders. This is millions of individual men in millions of individual lives, all arriving at the same conclusion at roughly the same time. The juice is not worth the squeeze. The return on investment is negative. The risk is astronomical and the reward is non existent. So they peacefully, quietly, and permanently withdrew. That is the power of distributed decision making. That is the power of men choosing themselves first for the first time in 50 years. And now the bill is coming due. Cities that celebrated defund the police are now begging for tougher enforcement because crime is out of control. Industries that celebrated diversity, hires over competence, are now quietly rehiring the competent men they pushed out because nothing works anymore. Dating markets that celebrated hypergamy are now ghost towns because the men who used to participate took their attention and their money and left. Even the birth rate conversation has shifted from women should be free to choose to we are facing demographic collapse and nobody knows what to do. And still, some people refuse to connect the dots. They want to blame dating apps. They want to blame social media. They want to blame pornography or video games or the economy or capitalism or anything except the one variable that actually changed. The social contract between men and women was shredded, and men were the only ones who faced consequences for noticing. So when the structure finally collapses, and it is collapsing right now, the same people who tore it down will look around for someone to blame, and the men will not be there to take it. The men will be on a beach in Thailand or in a gym in Texas or on a fishing boat in the Mediterranean or simply in a small apartment with a big screen and a bigger bank account, living the quiet life they were told they were not allowed to want. That is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Men did not lose the game. Men left the game. And the game is falling apart without them. Let me take you deeper now, because what we just covered was only the surface crack. The foundation is already hollowed out, and most people still refuse to look down. Picture this. For 50 years, we were sold a very specific story. The story went like this: men were the problem. Patriarchy was the problem. Masculinity itself was the problem. If we could just dismantle male spaces, male authority, male instincts, male everything, then humanity would finally float into some kind of frictionless utopia where nobody ever felt uncomfortable again. Universities taught it, corporations funded it, governments legislated it, Hollywood scripted it. Every major institution repeated the same message on loop until it felt like gravity. Men need to change. Men need to shrink. Men need to apologize. Men need to make room. Men need to step back. Men need to shut up and listen. And men, being the cooperative, problem solving, society building creatures that evolution spent 2 million years refining, did exactly what they were asked. They stepped back. They made room. They shut up. They listened. They went to therapy. They took sensitivity training. They learned to say her truth instead of the truth. They stopped catcalling, stopped flirting at work, stopped holding doors when it made someone uncomfortable, stopped telling jokes that might offend, stopped taking up space on the subway, stopped initiating in dating, stopped proposing too early, stopped expecting sex after dinner, stopped expecting anything at all. They did everything society demanded of them. And then society turned around and called them weak for complying. That was the moment the mask slipped. That was the moment millions of men looked up from their mandated self flagellation and realized the game was not about improvement, it was about elimination. The goalposts were not moving, they were being sawed off the field entirely. Every concession was treated as proof that more concessions were needed. Every apology was taken as evidence of deeper guilt. Every step back was celebrated as progress until men finally realized there was no finish line, only an endless retreat into oblivion. So they stopped retreating, they just stopped. They did not declare war, they did not burn anything down. They simply transferred their allegiance from a society that hated them to themselves and the small circle of brothers who still spoke plainly. They kept their jobs or built new ones, paid their taxes or minimized them legally, stayed out of trouble, lifted heavier, saved more money, read the old books, learned the old skills, and quietly constructed lives that no longer required female approval to feel complete. And the silence that followed was deafening. Because here's the part nobody wants to admit: women never actually replaced men. They only replaced the benefits men provided while rejecting the obligations that came with them. They wanted the income without the provider, the protection without the protector, the emotional labor without the physical labor, the commitment without the sacrifice, the leadership without the accountability. They wanted male utility with none of the male presence. And for a little while, technology and debt and social programs and thirsty men made that illusion possible. But illusions have expiration dates. Credit cards max out, governments run out of other people's money, infrastructure ages and nobody wants to fix it. Crime rises, and the people who demanded soft policing suddenly want hard policing again. Birth rates fall, and the pension systems that depend on an ever expanding base of new workers begin to collapse. And all at once, the subsidized independence that was sold as empowerment reveals itself for what it always was: a 30-year grace period financed by the very men who were being told they were obsolete. Now, the grace period is over and the reckoning is brutal. I want you to think about the timeline very carefully because the sequence is everything. First, they said men were not necessary for marriage, marriage rates collapsed. Then they said men were not necessary for children, single motherhood skyrocketed. Then they said men were not necessary for financial provision. Women entered the workforce in record numbers, and government support filled the gaps. Then they said men were not necessary for protection. Police were reframed, guns were demonized, self defense was questioned. Then they said men were not necessary for emotional stability. Therapy, wine, and friend groups would handle that. Then they said men were not necessary for sex. Toys and apps and casual arrangements would cover it. Then they said men were not necessary for companionship. Cats and Netflix and living my best life became the new husband. Every single male role was stripped away, mocked, outsourced, or replaced one by one over decades. And at every single step, the culture celebrated it as liberation until the cumulative weight of all those replacements finally hit critical mass. Now, the same women who celebrated the dismantling are standing in the wreckage asking why everything feels so empty, so expensive, so unsafe, so exhausting. They look around for the men they were told they did not need and discover those men built entirely new lives that no longer have room for the drama, the liability, or the one sided expectations. And the best part, the part that keeps me awake, smiling at night, is that men are not doing this out of spite. That is what the blue pill world cannot comprehend. This is not revenge. This is not a tantrum. This is not even protest. This is simple, rational self preservation. Men looked at the contract on offer, ran the numbers, assessed the risk, and calmly decided the deal was garbage. Then they walked away and built something better with the time and energy they used to waste chasing approval that was never coming. Let me give you some cold, hard data so nobody can dismiss this as feelings. Marriage rates in the United States have fallen to the lowest level ever recorded. We are now at roughly 5.1 marriages per 1,000 people, down from over 10 in the 1980s. In some major cities, the number is closer to 3 or 4. That is not a dip, that is a collapse. 40% of children are now born outside of marriage. And in many urban areas, that number exceeds 60%. The single mother household is now the norm in multiple demographics. Male college enrollment has fallen off a cliff. Women now outnumber men on campus by almost 60-40. And in some graduate programs, it is closer to 70-30. The pipeline of educated men is shrinking fast. Labor force participation for prime age men is at Depression era levels in some Western countries. In the US, it sits around 68% for men aged 25 to 54, meaning almost 1 in 3 men in their prime working years are not even looking for work. Birth rates across the entire developed world are below replacement. Japan, South Korea, Italy, Spain, Germany, Canada, all hovering between 1.2 and 1.6 births per woman when 2.1 is required just to maintain population. The only thing keeping many of these countries afloat is immigration, and even that is slowing. Home ownership for men under 35 has cratered. Marriage was historically the primary path to building generational wealth through home ownership. Remove marriage, remove the wealth transfer. Credit card debt among single women is skyrocketing, while single men are paying down debt faster than any other demographic. Why? Because men stop spending money on dates, gifts, dinners, vacations, engagement rings, and weddings that never provided a return. OnlyFans reported that 80% of its spending comes from a tiny fraction of male users, meaning a small group of desperate men are subsidizing millions of women who then turn around and say they do not need men. That model is already cracking as those men wake up and cancel subscriptions. Every single metric you look at tells the same story. Men withdrew, and the system that depended on male investment is discovering just how much it actually needed that investment. And still the coping continues. They say men are intimidated by strong women. Reality: men are repelled by entitled women who bring chaos and liability. They say men cannot handle equality. Reality: men looked at equality and saw it only applied downward to them, while women kept all their traditional privileges plus new ones. They say men are lost. Reality: men were never more found. They just found themselves outside the plantation. And they say men are afraid of commitment. Reality: men are afraid of government sanctioned wealth confiscation that disguises commitment. They say men are immature. Reality: men grew up and realized playing house with someone who views you as a utility is the actual immaturity. Every excuse collapses under 5 seconds of honest scrutiny. Now, here is where it gets really interesting because we are moving from observation into prediction, and the next 10 years are going to be the most dramatic wealth and power transfer in modern history. Men who walked away 10 years ago are now in their 30s and 40s with no debt, six-figure investment accounts, paid off houses, or the ability to buy one cash, multiple income streams, and zero obligations to anyone but themselves. They have the money, the freedom, and the experience that women in the same age bracket spent chasing validation instead of building. Women who followed the have it all script are hitting their late 30s and early 40s with student debt, car payments, maxed out credit cards, rental apartments they can barely afford, no children or children they raise alone, and a dating market where the men they want have either checked out completely or are dating women 10 to 20 years younger who did not spend a decade marinating in resentment. The wealth gap between single men and single women is already widening faster than at any point since they started keeping records. Single men under 40 are now the fastest growing demographic of millionaires in the United States. Single women under 40 are the fastest growing demographic filing for bankruptcy. That is not ideology, that is mathematics. And the gap is only going to accelerate because the compounding has already begun. The man who started investing 10 years ago, instead of paying for dates and weddings, now has a portfolio that grows while he sleeps. The woman who spent that same 10 years on vacations and brunches and therapy now has memories and debt. Time is the one resource nobody gets back, and men took their time back first. We are about to watch an entire generation of women age out of the sexual marketplace with nothing to show for it except stories nobody wants to hear, while the men they ignored or ridiculed quietly become the most eligible bachelors on the planet, except they have zero interest in bailing anyone out. That is the real red pill nobody wants to swallow. Men do not need to win the argument anymore. They just need to keep living well. And biology plus economics will do the rest. Countries are already starting to panic. Hungary pays women to have children. Poland is debating tax penalties for remaining childless. South Korea is throwing billions at the birth rate crisis with zero results. Japan has an entire ministry dedicated to reversing loneliness. Italy's prime minister literally stood up at a press conference and begged women to start having babies before the country disappears. And still, Western feminists call it oppression when you point out that actions have consequences. The cognitive dissonance is going to reach levels that will break people. Because the final stage, the part that is just now beginning, is when the same institutions that spent decades attacking men start openly begging them to come back. Not with respect, not with gratitude, but with guilt trips, shame campaigns, and eventually financial penalties. They will call it a crisis of masculinity. They will call it a mental health emergency. They will call it anything except what it actually is: the inevitable result of treating half the population like a disposable resource and being shocked when that resource disappears. And men will keep walking. They will walk to the gym. They will walk to the bank. They will walk to the airport. They will walk to the countries that still value them. They will walk to the brotherhoods that speak plainly. They will walk to the peace they finally found after decades of being told peace was oppression. And there is nothing anyone can do to stop it because you cannot force a man to care about a society that never cared about him. That is the beauty of it. The power was never in fighting the system, the power was in leaving it, and millions of men have already left. Here we go again, deeper into the machine that is now eating itself alive. Let me take you to the front row of the greatest show nobody wants to admit is happening: the global passport game. While Western cities are busy putting tampon dispensers in men's bathrooms and arguing about whether men can be pregnant, entire countries in Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America are rolling out the red carpet for the exact men the West spent 20 years trying to erase. And those men are boarding planes in numbers that should terrify every politician from Washington to London. We are talking about six-figure remote workers, crypto millionaires, engineers, tradesmen, entrepreneurs, and regular guys who simply saved $50,000 and realized they could live like kings somewhere else instead of serfs back home. They are landing in places like Medellin, Bucharest, Belgrade, Tbilisi, Phuket, Bali, and Mexico City, and they are being greeted like returning war heroes. Local governments are creating special digital nomad visas that last 1 to 10 years, tax free. Real estate markets are exploding because Western money spends like monopoly money in those currencies. Restaurants, gyms, co working spaces, and dating scenes are being built specifically for these men. And the local women, they grew up in cultures that never swallowed the men are trash Kool Aid, so they smile, cook, dress feminine, and treat a man's presence like a privilege instead of a burden. And compare that to London, where the average starter home is £1 million. And the average date expects you to pay £40 for two cocktails while she explains why masculinity is a social construct. And guess where the 35-year-old software developer with a 401k and no kids is choosing to live? Like, this is not theory. The numbers are public. Estonia's digital nomad visa applications are up 400% in 5 years. Portugal's golden visa program brought in 7 billion euros in foreign investment, almost all from men under 50. Thailand issued over 200,000 long term visas in 2024 alone. Georgia, the country, has seen its foreign born male population triple in 6 years. These are not tourists. These are permanent lifestyle relocations. These are men voting with their feet, their money, and their reproductive future. And the best part, these countries are not begging for diversity lectures. They are begging for skilled, high earning, low drama men who pay rent, tip well, start businesses, and do not bring chaos. They are getting exactly what the West threw away. Meanwhile, back in the Anglosphere, the coping has reached performance art levels. Politicians are holding emergency summits about falling sperm counts and male disengagement, while simultaneously passing laws that make it easier to take a man's children and income on the word of an accusation alone. Universities are creating male engagement officers to figure out why men stopped enrolling, while still teaching that masculinity is inherently toxic. Dating apps are sending emails to inactive male users offering free super likes and profile boosts because the gender ratio is now 4, 5, sometimes 10 women for every active man, and the apps are hemorrhaging money. The hamster wheel is spinning so fast it is catching fire, and the fire is spreading to the retirement myth. This one is going to hurt when it lands. The entire Western pension model, Social Security in the US, state pensions in the UK, Canada pension plan, all of it was built on a pyramid scheme that required an ever expanding base of new workers paying in to support the retirees cashing out. That model worked beautifully when women had 4, 5, 6 children, and most of them grew up, got married, and started paying taxes by 25. It collapses when the average woman has 1.4 children, starts her career at 28, and half the men in her age group either never marry or never have children. Do the math. In 1950, there were 7 workers paying into Social Security for every retiree in the United States. Today, there are 2.8. By 2035, the Social Security Administration itself admits it drops below 2. That is not sustainable. That is collapse. And the only solutions on the table are raise retirement age to 75, cut benefits by 30%, raise taxes dramatically, or import millions of young workers from abroad who will then need the same benefits in 40 years. Guess which group is going to get taxed the hardest to pay for all of this? Single men with no children. The same men who were told having a family was oppression are about to be told that funding everyone else's family is now mandatory patriotism. They are already floating the idea of childless taxes in South Korea and Hungary. Italy is debating tax penalties for people who do not reproduce. Canada's finance minister openly said the quiet part out loud: immigration is the only thing keeping our pension system afloat. Translation: we need new bodies to tax because the old plan stopped working when people stopped having children. And who stopped having children first and loudest? The exact demographic that spent 20 years celebrating child free life, cat motherhood, and dinks and dual income, no kids. They partied, the men watched, learned, and said, cool, I'll keep my money and my freedom too. Now the bill is coming, and the men have already left the restaurant. This is where the tax revolt is going to start, and it is going to be glorious. And imagine millions of high earning, high skilled men who owe nothing to anyone, quietly restructuring their lives to pay the absolute minimum into systems that hate them. Remote work, residency hacking, crypto, offshore companies, perpetual traveler flags. zero tax jurisdictions. It is all already happening. The average man cannot do it tomorrow, but the top 20% already are. And the knowledge is spreading faster than governments can close the loopholes. The Panama Papers were just the warm up act. We are about to see a wave of financial emigration that will make the brain drain of the 1990s look like a Sunday picnic. And the beauty is that governments cannot stop it without destroying their own economies. Ban crypto, the tech bros leave. Tax remote workers extra, they change residency in 6 months. Shame men for abandoning their country. Those men already abandoned the country that abandoned them first. The leverage has completely flipped. Women still have some leverage in the sexual marketplace in their 20s and early 30s, but men now control the economic and geographic leverage for the rest of their lives. A 40-year-old man with a seven-figure portfolio and three passports is more untouchable than the hottest 25-year-old influencer with 50,000 Instagram followers and $60,000 in student debt. One has options that increase every year. The other has a window that is closing faster than she realizes. And biology is crueler than any red pill YouTuber could ever be. Every year after 35, female fertility drops off a cliff, while male fertility barely budges until 60. Every year after 35, a man's earning power, net worth, and life experience compound, while a woman's primary asset, youth and beauty, depreciates whether she likes it or not. The same society that told her to live her truth and never settle is about to watch her scramble to lock down a man who has zero incentive to play the game by the old rules. That scramble is already starting. We are seeing the rise of the soft relaunch. Women in their late 30s and early 40s deleting the old party photos, unarchiving the modest dresses, suddenly discovering religion, suddenly talking about traditional values, suddenly claiming they were always conservative at heart. The same women who wrote think pieces about how marriage is a tool of oppression are now writing think pieces about how feminism sold them a lie. The same women who bragged about their body counts are now shaming younger women for having any sexual history at all. The mental gymnastics are Olympic gold, and men are simply watching from the sidelines eating popcorn because the trust is gone. You cannot spend 20 years telling a generation of men they are inherently violent, inherently privileged, inherently guilty, inherently disposable, and then turn around at 38 and say, just kidding, we want to have your babies now, no questions about the past. That is not how male psychology works. Men remember, men calculate risk, men protect themselves now. The wall is not just real, it is reinforced concrete with barbed wire and a moat. And the most peaceful part of all of this is that men do not need to fight anymore. They just need to keep doing what they are already doing: lifting, stacking money, building brotherhoods, traveling, learning skills, staying healthy, and enjoying the greatest period of male freedom in recorded history. The war was won the moment men stopped caring about winning the approval of a system that never valued them in the first place. The next phase is already rolling out in real time, and most people are still pretending it is background noise. It is not noise, it is the sound of tectonic plates shifting under the entire Western social order. We are watching the birth of the most powerful male voting bloc in modern history, and politicians can feel it in their bones, even if they cannot say it out loud yet. For decades, men voted like their wives, girlfriends, or mothers told them to vote. They pulled the lever for who would be better for families, for women's rights, for compassion, for equality, because they were raised to believe their job was to provide and protect, even with their ballot. That era is dead and buried. Today's man under 45, especially the one who has already walked away, votes like a man who has zero dependence, zero guilt, and zero interest in funding other people's lifestyles. He votes for lower taxes, stronger borders, less regulation, school choice, gun rights, fiscal responsibility, and consequences for crime. He does not care about subsidized daycare, student loan forgiveness for gender studies degrees, or free birth control. He is not swayed by tears on television or promises of reproductive justice. He has run the numbers and realized every single one of those programs is paid for by his labor and transferred to people who spent years calling him toxic. And there are tens of millions of him. In the United States alone, unmarried men outnumber unmarried women for the first time in recorded history. That gap is growing by roughly 500,000 every single year. In the 2024 election cycle, unmarried men broke for the right by double digit margins in almost every swing state. Pollsters called it a surprise. It was not a surprise. It was the first public flex of a muscle that has been quietly growing in the gym for a decade. Europe is the same story on steroids. Germany's AfD surges every time migration and crime dominate the headlines, and the core of that surge is young men who have nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Italy elected its most right wing government since Mussolini because Italian men looked at the birth rate, looked at the welfare state, looked at the boats arriving daily, and said enough. Poland, Hungary, and the entire Visegrad bloc are basically giant middle fingers aimed at Brussels, built on the votes of men who never swallowed the progressive Kool-Aid in the first place. The political establishment is terrified because they finally realize the old playbook does not work anymore. You cannot shame these men. You cannot call them incels because most of them have options overseas if they want them. You cannot call them losers because their bank accounts and passports say otherwise. You cannot guilt them with think of the children because they do not have any and they are not planning on having any under the current rules. The only card left is force, and force is coming. They will start with soft coercion, media campaigns about the crisis of masculinity, mental health hotlines, mandatory re engagement programs disguised as job training, tax penalties disguised as fairness. Then they will move to hard coercion, childless taxes, mandatory national service framed as giving back, wealth taxes aimed directly at single men with no dependents, restrictions on international money transfers, passport revocation threats for tax debt, digital currencies programmed to block spending in unapproved countries. Every single one of those measures is already being tested somewhere on the planet right now. South Korea is debating a tax on unmarried men. France has floated a loneliness contribution. Canada is building a national digital ID that will eventually control where your money can be spent. The EU is working on legislation that will tax remittances to non EU countries at punitive rates. The United States Treasury has already proposed monitoring all bank transfers over $600. They smell the exodus and they are trying to lock the doors before the building burns down. But they are too late. The knowledge is out. The tools are out. The flight paths are mapped. Millions of men have already restructured their lives to be untouchable by the systems that hate them. They hold multiple residencies. They keep wealth in hard assets and privacy coins. They run businesses registered in places that do not care about Western social credit scores. They have brotherhoods that share information faster than any government agency can react. The harder the system squeezes, the more men slip through the fingers. And on the other side of the world, entire societies that never abandon reality are eating the West's lunch. Look at the United Arab Emirates. Zero income tax, gold visas for skilled men, women who still value family and femininity, skyscrapers, safety, sunshine, and a government that openly says, we want high value men here. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, even Bahrain are running the same playbook. They watched the West self destruct and decided to import the one resource the West threw away: competent, driven men who just want to work, build, and live in peace. Eastern Europe is doing the same with less oil money, but twice the beauty. Poland now has the lowest unemployment in the EU because Polish men never stopped being men and the women never forgot how to be women. Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, They are all experiencing a male renaissance while London and Paris argue about pronouns in primary school. The wealth transfer is going to be biblical. A man who leaves California tomorrow with $200,000 in savings lands in Dubai and is immediately upper class. The same man stays in San Francisco and is lower middle class with roommates at 45. A man who moves to Warsaw with 50,000 euros, buys an apartment outright, and dates women 15 years younger who cook for him and call him sir. The same man in Berlin rents a 400 square foot studio and pays half his income in taxes to fund people who hate him. The math is so obvious it hurts. And yet millions still have not made the move because they are waiting for permission that will never come. Stop waiting. And the window is wide open right now, but windows close, visas get canceled, laws change, wars start, fiat currencies collapse. 10 years from now, the man who hesitated will be begging for an overpriced visa that no longer exists, while the man who moved in 2025 is a citizen with 3 kids who speak 4 languages and a net worth in 8 figures. Time is the only currency that compounds in one direction. While all of this is happening, the retirement myth is reaching its final stage: total exposure. By 2033, the Social Security Trust Fund in the United States is projected to be exhausted. That is not a maybe. That is the government's own number. When that day comes, benefits will be cut by 25 to 30% automatically unless Congress votes to raise taxes or borrow trillions more. Guess who is going to get the bill? The man with no kids, no wife, no mortgage interest deduction, no dependent write offs. The man whose payroll taxes have been subsidizing everyone else's lifestyle for 20 years is about to be told his check is getting slashed so the system can keep paying people who spent decades telling him he was the problem. That moment is going to be the spark that lights the prairie fire. Millions of men will simply say no. They will retire abroad on $500 a month in countries where that is a king's ransom. They will go gray market and barter. They will build parallel economies. They will refuse to participate in a system that already took everything and now wants more. Governments will threaten, cajole, seize assets, freeze accounts, and every time they do, another 100,000 men will disappear overseas or go underground. The Soviet Union collapsed when men stopped believing in the system and stopped working for it. The West is heading for the same cliff, just with better marketing. And when it falls, the men who walked away early will be standing on the other side of the world, feet in the sand, drink in hand, watching the sunset on an empire that forgot half its population was voluntary. That is the end game. Not revenge, not rage. Simple, quiet victory, the kind of victory that comes from refusing to play a rigged game and building your own table instead. Let us start with the only thing that actually matters: daily habits of unbreakable men. Every single man who pulled himself out of the matrix and built real freedom runs some version of the same operating system. The details change, but the core never does. 1. He wakes up early before the world has a chance to ruin his day. 5:30, 6 o'clock, sometimes 4:45. He owns the first hour of sunlight. No phone, no news, no messages. Just water, movement, and silence. That single habit alone puts him in the top 1% of discipline on the entire planet. 2, he trains his body like it is the only asset he is guaranteed to keep at 80. Heavy compound lifts 4 to 5 days a week, rucking or sprinting on the others, daily walks in the sun, cold showers or ice baths when he can. He is not trying to look good on Instagram. He is building a machine that will carry him through chaos when the grid goes down and the food disappears. 3, he stacks money like oxygen. Minimum 20% of every dollar that hits his account goes into assets that cannot be inflated away: Bitcoin, gold, silver, real estate, in stable jurisdictions, cash flowing businesses. Another 20% goes into experiences and relationships that compound, travel, languages, brotherhood events, skills that pay forever. 4, he protects his attention like a vault. No mainstream news, no social media doom scrolling, no gossip, no drama feeds. He curates his inputs so ruthlessly that most people think he lives under a rock. Good. Rocks do not get brainwashed. 5, he builds multiple streams of location independent income before he needs them. A skill that pays in dollars or crypto from anywhere on earth is the modern equivalent of owning land in 1850. Copywriting, coding, sales, trading, e commerce, consulting, content, whatever scales and cannot be taken away. 6, he keeps his circle tiny and viciously loyal. 5 to 10 brothers who would show up with a shovel at 3 a.m. if he called. Everyone else is scenery. 7, he never stops learning. Books, not reels. Mentors, not influencers. Real world reps, not theory. Every year he adds one high value skill that makes him harder to replace and easier to move. Do those 7 things for 3 years straight, and you will look up one day and realize the matrix cannot touch you anymore. Now let us talk cities and countries because geography is destiny in the 2020s. Tier 1, untouchable freedom zones right now, Dubai and the broader UAE. Zero income tax, golden visas for anyone with a pulse in a business, women who still believe in femininity, safety, sun, and a government that openly courts high value men. Cost of living is higher than 5 years ago, but so is the quality of everything else. Mexico, specifically Merida, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico City, and the Baja Peninsula. Dollar still strong, culture still respects masculinity, cost of living laughably low if you stay outside the gringo bubbles. 10-year path to citizenship if you want it. Panama, the Singapore of Latin America. Territorial tax system means foreign income is tax-free forever. Pensionado Visas gives you permanent residency for $5,000 in the bank and $200 a month passive income. Panama City is Miami in 1995 with better food and cheaper everything. Serbia, the hidden gem of Europe, 1 year temporary residency for 3,500 euros, 3 years later, permanent residency, €1 symbolic tax on foreign income for the first 10 years if you structure it right. Belgrade is Eastern Europe's best kept secret. Beautiful women, low cost, high energy, and a government that wants your money and your DNA. Paraguay, the nuclear option. Permanent residency in 3 months, citizenship in 3 years, zero tax on foreign income forever, land cheaper than anywhere else on earth, and a fertility rate that still makes sense. Asuncion is rough around the edges, but the countryside is paradise if you want to disappear and build. Tier 2, watch closely, entering the window now. Albania, Montenegro, and North Macedonia, EU candidates throwing visas at remote workers. Costs are still 2015 Thailand levels. Infrastructure catching up fast. Georgia, the country. Tax residency in 1 year, 20% flat tax or 1% if you register as a micro business. Tbilisi is Prague 20 years ago. Turkey, Istanbul and the Aegean coast. Lira is trash, but if you earn dollars, life is absurdly cheap. Citizenship by investment dropped to $400,000 and climbing back up. Get in before it closes. Tier 3, future plays. Still too early, but position now. El Salvador. Bitcoin legal tender. President Bukele openly recruiting Western men. Zero capital gains tax on crypto, surfing, volcanoes, and a government that understands the game. Uruguay, the Switzerland of South America. Stable, boring, expensive, but untouchable when everything else is on fire. Malaysia, MM2H program reopening in 2025 with better terms. 10-year visa, low cost, great food, Muslim country that somehow still works. Pick one, go visit for 30 days, feel the energy, talk to the man already there, then plant a flag before the herd arrives and prices triple. Next, the only assets that matter in the next decade: Bitcoin, not crypto. Bitcoin. Everything else is speculation. Bitcoin is digital property with a fixed supply and a network that gets stronger every time a government attacks it. Own as much as you can stomach the volatility for. Physical gold and silver in your possession or in allocated vaults outside the banking system. When the ATMs stop working, the man with a tube of maples in his safe eats steak while everyone else argues about CBDCs. Productive real estate in countries that still respect property rights. A paid off apartment in Belgrade or a small farm in Paraguay will be worth more than a McMansion in California when the music stops. Cash flowing online businesses, a newsletter, a YouTube channel, a software tool, an e commerce store, something that prints money while you sleep and cannot be seized by a divorce court or a tax authority. High value skills that travel: sales, copywriting, software development, trading, negotiation, languages. The man who can make six figures from a laptop in a cafe in Medellin is freer than the man making 500,000 a year chained to a desk in New York. Everything else is noise. And now the daily action plan for the next 12 months, broken down so even a beginner can execute. Month 1 to 3, get your body and mind right. Lift 4 days a week, walk 10,000 steps every day, delete social media apps except one for messaging, read one red pill book a week. Start with The Rational Male, No More Mr. Nice Guy, The Way of Men, The Unplugged Alpha. Month 4 to 6, build the money machine. Pick one high income skill, spend 2 hours every morning mastering it, launch the first offer before you feel ready, take the punches, iterate. Month 7 to 9, stack an escape fund, $50,000 liquid in stable coins and cash. That is the golden number, enough to buy a one-way ticket and live like a king for 18 months anywhere outside the West while you build the next level. Month 10 to 12, plant the flag. Take a 30-day scouting trip to your top 2 locations. Meet the men on the ground. Sign a lease. Open a local bank account. Get the residency paperwork started. Come home, sell or rent everything that will not fit in 2 suitcases, and leave. That is it. 12 months from zero to untouchable. Most men will read this and do nothing. They will wait for permission, for certainty, for the perfect moment that never comes. The man who acts will look up in 5 years and realize he lives in a penthouse overlooking the Adriatic, dates women who adore him, pays less tax in a year than he used to pay in a month, and wakes up every morning owning his time completely. That man will not be lucky. He will be disciplined. And discipline is simply love for your future self made visible. This was never about rage, it was about revelation. The revelation that your peace was never outside you. It was waiting on the other side of the decision to stop begging for a seat at a table that was built to keep you serving. You do not need permission. You do not need forgiveness. You do not need to fix what hated you first. You just need to walk. So walk, brother. Walk to the gym, walk to the bank, walk to the airport, walk to the life you were always meant to live. And when they finally look up from the wreckage and ask where all the men went, just smile, tip your hat, and keep walking. All roads lead to MWA, men walking away. Now, what did you think about everything we just went through? Do you agree? Are you already seeing this play out in your city, your country, your own life? Drop a comment below and let me know exactly where you are watching from and what move you are making next. Like the video if it hit hard, subscribe if you have not already, share it with every brother who needs to hear the truth. Buy me a Red Bull if you want more fire like this. Link in the description, and just remember, at all roads lead to MWA, men walking away. Cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.